Alright, welcome back to the New Sentinel. This is Chukwuka here, and today we're digging into the nitty-gritty, you might say, the front lines and the fault lines of Ukraine's big counteroffensive. Now, for those who've been following since our summer series on resistance, you'll remember how much we debated the whole momentum narrative. Headlines keep changing, right? Feels like deja vu from my Gulf War days. You'd see reports, bold letters, breakthrough, and then suddenly it's stalled. It takes a lot, I've learned, to separate battlefield reality from, how do I put it, propaganda seasoning. Ethan, what are you seeing on the ground right now? Is this another Gulf-style sandbox opera or something different?
Yeah, Chukwuka, that's a solid comparison. But here's where I hang my hat different. Ukraine's current tactics, especially out east, look a bit like our maneuver doctrine from the 90s. Lots of probing attacks, looking for soft edges, testing Russian lines almost like, heck, a chessboard. But whereas we enjoyed total air superiority and robust logistics, the Ukrainians are basically working with Apache toolkit. It's quick shifts of armor, a lot of static trench stuff, and barren no man's land. It's not just brute force, it's cautious, almost improvised, kind of like our small unit ops in Fallujah, but with none of the resupply confidence.
Yes, and Ethan, while your doctrine talk helps us picture the movement, it's not the full reality for many people. I recently spoke with Ukrainian families near the Zaporizhia axis, frontline villages. What they told me sounds absolutely brutal. So much time is spent hiding in basements, hoping drones don't spot them, and even kids know how to identify incoming artillery by sound. When we draw all these parallels to American tactics, we should acknowledge these are not highly equipped NATO units. These are mostly civilians with military training, sometimes minimal, facing relentless bombardment. We have to remember, a counteroffensive to a Western analyst is survival to many there.
Let me jump in here, because logistics are where the rubber meets the road. No resupply, no fight, period. Ukraine's got all this kit coming in, but, truth be told, a lot of it ends up stuck miles from the actual front. I read a British defense analysis last week. Strikes on railways, busted bridges, and then this constant issue, ammunition dumps popping off from Russian drone hits. Back in my deployment days, we used the term log chain fragged when stuff didn't move. That's what they're dealing with. Sometimes, it's days just to get bullets and clean water forward. Forget about anti-tank rounds and spare armored tracks.
And see, Duke, that's almost copy-paste from when coalition forces first hit logistical snags in Iraq. People at home think it's all about firepower, but out there, if your beans and bullets don't show up, it's done. I remember headlines in '91 talking final pushes and encirclements, but as soldiers, we were stuck by broken convoy routes. Gotta say, seeing the patterns repeat makes it harder to swallow some of the quick victory talk.
Right, and it's slower and dirtier than people think. There's no magic button. Ukraine's command is adapting, but so is Russia. If history taught us anything, it's that the grind favors whoever adapts logistics and morale fastest. Speaking of which, we're about to get into just how the West's aid game is shifting those scales.
Okay, so boots on the ground. Here's the reality. When these big Western aid packages get announced, everyone gets hyped about tanks and fancy missiles. But let me tell you, not half of that shows up at the front when it matters. NATO's running political calculations before they send anything, sometimes too late. US just made headlines promising new artillery shipments, but our guys always say, don't believe it till you're pulling it off the truck. Germans made a lot of noise recently about more martyrs, but as of last week, those haven't made a dent on the lines.
That's right, and while governments debate red lines, actual red lines are drawn in blood. I met some internally displaced Ukrainians in Warsaw last month, families who fled Mykolaiv after promises of Western systems never materialized. Their stories are sobering. It's not just about who gets what weapon, it's about whether Western policies are prolonging displacement, unintentionally or not. Even International Rescue Committee officials have voiced concern. The aid debate can be so focused on security, it sometimes misses humanitarian priorities. And frankly, arms shipments are a lifeline and a burden. Where weapons arrive, civilians often fear increased escalation and retaliation.
Yeah, that's a crucial point, Olga. The whole process reminds me of a chess match, where the real move is what you withhold. For some NATO countries, there's this fear. If you go all in on ammo, escalation spirals out of control. Intelligence reports say that's why things like Taurus missiles or long-range ATACMS aren't on the table. Some governments are banking on slow drip support, hoping to keep Ukraine in the fight, but avoid Russia crossing any so-called threshold. It's calculated risk management, politics dictating supply at the risk of frontline outcomes. Sometimes you win that gamble, sometimes you don't.
And the media? Oh, they're experts at spinning that slow drip. Headlines make it sound like a non-stop parade of aid, unprecedented support, unified West. But if you break it down, it's drip feeding. I always tell folks, question those narratives. Ask, is this public relations or actual boots and beans? I mean, just look how support drops or surges based on which way the political wind is blowing in Washington or Berlin. Public opinion, both here and Europe, pushes governments to act until the next election cycle or until domestic fatigue sets in. Just like with the old Gulf coalitions, we covered that last episode, remember? A lot of the game is about looking like you're helping, not always actually helping.
Exactly, and it's the civilians, the people caught in between, who carry the price of that political show. That's a pattern across conflicts. You see it again and again. Anyway, what's really fascinating is how Russia's been evolving in response to this drip feed, and honestly, to their own set of challenges. Let's turn there next.
All right, so Russia isn't just waiting for the West to make up its mind. They're shifting gears fast. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War and RUSI have flagged some major changes. First off, gone are the full frontal Soviet-style assaults, at least in some sectors. Now we're seeing a lot more dispersed command, sneaky use of small UAVs, and a return to heavy deception ops. Russian doctrine is morphing. Think less Cold War battalions, more hybrid, almost guerrilla-style stuff in contested zones. It's a real blend, old Soviet discipline with new, adaptive, almost desperate energy.
On the ground, that adaptive energy is often brutal for civilians. Independent Russian sources and activists document forced deportations, filtration camps, constant shelling of supposed liberated zones. Even as Russian tactics evolve, their disregard for international law hasn't. The human rights abuses aren't just byproducts, they're part of the system. And after talking to colleagues back in Moscow, some reporting underground, there's a sense Russian authorities are trying to normalize all of this. Propaganda is evolving right alongside strategy.
Olga, that lines up with what I saw during my own deployment in another theater. When an adversary feels pressure, they innovate ugly and fast. Saw it firsthand. One week you're fighting a predictable script. Next week they flip the playbook. Makes the chessboard analogy Ethan loves a real blood sport. And when command collapses, it's often logistics that go first. Speaking of which, Duke, didn't you have something about Russian supply failures from that UK report?
Yep, got my hands on a breakdown by British defense analysts. Russian rear echelons have been hammered, supplies bottlenecked, rail disruptions, and a mounting number of trucks just vanishing. Their logistics tail is a weak spot, just like Ukraine's. But here's the kicker. Russians have been trying to patch it by pulling old Soviet gear out of mothballs and just improvising fixes. That's risky. Sometimes their front lines go quiet, not because they're regrouping, but because their supply chain's in cardiac arrest. Saw the same thing in my second tour, Afghanistan. Enemy gets creative, but if they can't eat or shoot, the fancy tactics don't matter for long.
And that's the story of the conflict's next phase. Who adapts faster with what they've actually got? Reminds me a little of our discussion with that AI and drone episode, where both sides keep innovating. Only this time, it's as much about survival as it is about strategy.
Well spoken, folks. I think that's all we've got for today. This conflict isn't just about front lines and geopolitics. It's daily choices, risky moves, real lives. Olga, Duke, Ethan, always a pleasure sharing this table with you. Count on us to come back for another round, so keep your eyes peeled for the next Sentinel Deep Dive.
Thank you, Chukwuka. Grateful for this space, and to our listeners, remember, behind every shift in strategy, there's a family, a story, and a consequence. Stay safe, everyone.
Y'all take care. Stay sharp. Stay ready. See you next time.
All right, signing off. And remember, if you want to really know what's happening, keep your head on a swivel and your mind open. Bye, everyone.